Hi guys, it's your faculty Ranganathan S.V. Kondala. Now, in this session, I'm going to introduce you to some of the questions which came in UPSC CSE History Mains, optional questions. Now, over the next couple of time, we'll be seeing the answers of the questions which came in UPSC CSE, and in this session I'm going to discuss with you the questions of modern Indian history. Now the very first question which came is Battle of Plassey 1757 was a skirmish while Battle of Buxar was a real war. Now this is a straightforward question for you. You generally will never have any confusion in trying to answer this. This is basically general studies level question. So they're basically asking you to compare between Battle of Plassey and the Battle of Buxar. Okay, now the way to answer this question would be justify the statement that the Battle of Plassey was essentially a skirmish. Yes, it was a skirmish because Robert Clive was able to successfully get the advantage in this battle by doing a backdoor adjustment with Mir Jafar, right? And if you observe, if you remember, Jafar actually did not even participate in the battle. Instead, Mir Madan and Lal were the ones who actually participated in this battle. So you will start this question by giving an introduction about Battle of Plassey. Battle of Plassey was actually a battle which began the Bengal Wars, and you give an introduction about Battle of Plassey and then start justifying the statement about why this battle is actually a skirmish. It's called a skirmish because it was never really fought on a serious term or as a serious battle, but rather in the very beginning of the battle itself, Mir Jafar did not participate in the battle, and instead Mir Madan and Mohan Lal actually tried to help Siraj-ud-Dawla, and in the battle itself, Jafar instigated Siraj-ud-Dawla to actually surrender. So that's why this is called a skirmish. But at the same time, the second half of this answer, Battle of Buxar was a real war. Now, why Battle of Buxar is actually considered a real war in that sense is, then you try to answer the Battle of Buxar. It was always considered a proper war because it had all the schema of a war. Mughal, Shah Alam, Qasim, and Awadh Nawab, Shuja. These three participated in this battle in full-fledged and full control. They did everything required for being part of this battle. Shuja-ud-Dawla, Mir Qasim, and Mughal. And the trigger of Battle of Buxar was to actually, in a way, an attempt by these guys to prove their superiority over British. So there was no backdoor settlements, no backdoor adjustments in this battle, but rather this was done perfectly like a full-fledged battle. And that's why this battle is actually called a real war, and the result of this also had a direct effect. So you write all the statements, you give the detail of Battle of Buxar, conclude the statement by saying, in reality, while Buxar never really ended with a treaty as a settlement ending the war, Battle of Plassey never ended as a treaty with the settlement of a war. Buxar ended with the treaty of Allahabad. So you give a proper, dignified statement. Two parts of this answer: introduction. Part 1, justifying why Battle of Plassey is a skirmish. Part 2, why Battle of Buxar is a war. And then conclusion, correcting and supporting the statement of the question. The next question in this paper was Treaty of Amritsar 1809 was a significant for its immediate as well as potential effects. Now, in fact, the minute you see this question, the first thing that that should have come to your mind is the Treaty of Amritsar being signed by Ranjit Singh. Maharaja Ranjit Singh. In fact, this question is coming directly from Grover's textbook, B.L. Grover. Modern India by B.L. Grover. Directly, it's coming directly from there. Again, give an introduction. What is Treaty of Amritsar? How it started? Treaty of Amritsar is important for its immediate as well as potential effects. In its immediate effect, it checked one of the most cherished ambitions of Ranjit Singh, that is to extend his rule over the Sikh nation in full, living east or west of river Satluj. And Ranjit Singh wanted to stabilize his kingdom, and Treaty of Amritsar actually gave him the power, because the main important term of Treaty of Amritsar was Ranjit Singh was to stay on the west of Satluj, and the east of Satluj was to be there with British. By accepting river Satluj as the boundary line, his dominions and the companies, Maharaja actually compromised his cherished political ideal. What was his cherished political ideal? To have a kingdom on both sides of Satluj. Instead, he got only the western side of Satluj, suffering both territorial and economic losses. This was the immediate effect. What is the immediate effect? Maharaja Ranjit Singh had to compromise on his ideal. According to historian Cunningham, the treaty with the company gave Ranjit Singh a complete freedom, carte blanche, to act so far as the region to the west of Satluj was concerned. So this also was an immediate effect, that Ranjit Singh got complete freedom to act on the western side of Satluj as per his wish. As he wanted, with the disappearance of all danger in the time being, Maharaja directed his energies towards the west and captured Multan, Kashmir and Peshawar regions. In fact, given that there was no eastern threat for Maharaja, given that he was not afraid of the British invasions anymore, he could concentrate his entire effort, entire time on the western expansions. In its ultimate effects, the treaty showed weak position of Ranjit Singh when you compare with the company. So these 1, 2, 3 parts are immediate effects, and these are the potential effects. The ultimate potential effect is the treaty actually showed how Ranjit Singh was actually comparatively weaker when you compare with the company's status in the north and northwest. The British were brought close to the frontiers of Lahore Kingdom, and this brought the danger of war very near, and eventually that's what happened. When Ranjit Singh died, British interfered in the Lahore Kingdom, the Kingdom of Punjab. Besides, the treaty gave company a level of autonomy and a level of control over Ranjit Singh's relations with neighboring states, particularly of Sindh, Bahawalpur and Afghanistan. So, the immediate effect would be Ranjit Singh losing his sovereignty, Ranjit Singh losing his long cherished aim, Ranjit Singh losing his control. Longer effect, long-term effect, potential effect, Ranjit Singh actually losing his very existence, and Punjab becoming a weaker state. Punjab becoming indirectly dependent on company's control. So given introduction, all these points, in conclusion, just rewrite the statement, and that should be enough. Let us see the next question now. Okay guys, so till now we've discussed 2 questions, 1A, 1B, which was about the Battle of Plassey, Buxar analysis, etc. Okay, now the third question of history optional, modern India, paper 2, part A. The question is, famines were not just because of food grain scarcity, but were a direct result of colonial economic policies. Now, this is in fact a very direct question. So, there's not much to analyze, remember, or get confused in this. This is a direct question, 2 parts. So, famines were not just because of food scarcity, they were also a direct result of colonial economic policies. So, emphasis of your answer must be about highlighting the famine and also particularly the colonial economic policies. You can use examples like the 1945 artificial Bengal famine, which was created by Winston Churchill's economic policy, or even the lack of interest in the 1899 Chapaya Akal issue. Okay, the colonial policies implicated basically rack renting or random or extreme collection of rents from the people. Rack renting, war levies, free trade policies, expansion of export agriculture, basically those agricultural crops which are benefiting the British economy, and neglect of agricultural investments. These are basic points on which you can give a couple of points to highlight. According to Mike Davis, now this is coming directly from IGNO. IGNO textbook has this topic directly. Okay, export crops displace millions acres of the crop which people could have used for domestic sustenance, and increase vulnerability of Indians to food crisis. Because see, if you understand, people, one of the important economic policy of British colonial government was to promote indigo farming, and indigo farming was particularly promoting the growth of indigo crops replacing food crops in Bengal. During the Bengal famine of 1770, East India Company raised taxes drastically and exacerbated it, basically made it unmanageable. Even if the famine had not caused by the British colonial government. See, the famines were not really because of the British government. Famines were a standard feature of India's economy or India's climatic situation. The problem was how the famines were managed. That is what actually made famines more difficult. Your answer should keep on highlighting that point. Indian exports of opium, rice, wheat, indigo, jute and cotton were a key component of the economy of the British, and generating vital foreign currency primarily from China, stabilizing low prices in the British grain market. So basically, one of the standard features of British economic policy was, or colonial economic policy was, even if Indians are suffering because of lack of food, they did encourage export of food grains. Your answer should keep on highlighting this. The policy lapses such as prioritizing distribution of vital supplies to the military, 1945 famine, civil service and others, as well as stopping rice imports was another major reason for the disputes, for the failure of the colonial economic policies. Now that made things even more difficult. Famines as such were a product of both uneven rainfall and British economic and administrative policies. This are taken directly from NCERT. In fact, most of these questions are coming from standard books. The first major famine that took place in East India Company was the Great Bengal famine of 1770, 1716 and 1770 after the Diwani. Now in fact, you can even use this, highlight this point, how the double government policy of British after the Battle of Buxar actually led to a famine within the first 4 years. And this was highlighted by British members of parliament in the parliament itself. About a quarter of the third of the population of Bengal starved in a 10-month period. The main reason East India Company is extraction of taxes, absolute extraction of taxes, and also the policy of laissez-faire which the British colonial government, particularly East India Company, was following in India, made things even worse. Although one of the causes of the famine was cutting off of the supply of rice to Bengal during the fall of Rangoon, particularly 1945. See, this 1945 thing had been in news a lot. Churchill's famine. According to Irish economic professor Cormac O'Grada, the priority was given to military considerations and poor of poverty of Bengal, and the poor people of Bengal were completely left out. There was a standard economic policy by the colonial government. In conclusion, you can say the colonial government promoted British economy, sustained British state, even at the cost of the poor in India and the common man in India. Now, this is a very good question. Straightforward answers. There is nothing much for you to understand into this or to confuse in this. The next question: Santal Rebellion, penetration of outsiders called Dikus by Santals completely destroyed the familiar world of the and forced them into action of possession of their lost territory. Santals lived in scattered various districts of East India, particularly in Bengal, etc. With the introduction of permanent settlement, they started getting accumulated into a single place. The Santals were employed as laborers with promise of wages or rent-free access to lands. However, eventually they became forced into agricultural serfdom, exploited it well. Most of the tribal lands were leased out to non-Santal zamindars. If you understand, you can highlight on the point of permanent settlement, promoting absentee landlordism. How the permanent settlement was actually promoting absentee landlordism, and that led to coming of Dikus, the outsiders, into Santal. Penetration of outsiders, Santal completely destroyed their familiar world. In fact, most of these outsiders who came, they never understood how the Santals work, how Santal life was, what was Santal tradition was. Now, this coming directly from Grover. This statement is coming from B.L. Grover's textbook. UPSC seems to have referred to this. Question paper setter seems to have referred to this textbook. The most effective tribal movement of this period, you can talk about Santal Rule or Santal Rebellion. Santal lived in scattered districts of Brabhum, Chodalpur, Palamau, Hazaribagh, Midnapur, Banpura regions, and most of the model was Santals used to live on shifting cultivation. Burn, redo. Santalis used to use a lot of shifting cultivation. But when the Santals cleared the forest and started cultivation in this area, particularly Rajas of Maheshpur and Pakur leased out Santal villages to zamindars and moneylenders as part of their permanent settlement plan. As part of their permanent settlement plan, most of these lands were leased out. And these zamindars, the new zamindars who were coming, eventually became exploitative. Dominico was the model where they were driven out of their own lands, and eventually these Dikus were then supported by local police and an entire system of society to which Santals were completely alien. Eventually what happened is the Santal familial world, the Santal life, see, one of the most common features of Santali life was shifting cultivation. Now with the coming of permanent settlement, that is gone. Santals don't have this. Santals cleared the forest and started cultivation in this area and neighboring areas. These moneylenders were quite exploitative, and that is what eventually led to Santal Rebellion. In the conclusion of this answer, you can use the same statement of the question and say, this continuous change of Santalis and the cultural shock or cultural discontent between Santalis and the Dikus is what led to the Santal Rebellion. Okay, the next question. 1E. Within a limited scope, the Indian scientists could pursue original scientific research in colonial India. See, scientific research in colonial India had always been, and the idea is basically it's talking about how science and technology was still encouraged in the colonial India, although within the domains of the government. See, science and technology research remained an exclusive government exercise in India for a long time, particularly in colonial India. Now, in spite of a lot of difficult conditions, particularly lack of funding, lack of extensive support, lack of institutional support and lack of funding, even in spite of all of this, and also government's lukewarm attitude to support such a thing, quite a few scientists worked and came out of this period with tremendously beautiful results, like Sir Ronald Ross, who did original work in relation between malaria and mosquito. In fact, Ronald Ross Hospital is also there in Hyderabad. In colonial India, it was established in Hyderabad called the Fever Hospital. This was well known for Ronald Ross is one of the first guys to understand the link between mosquito and malaria. McNamara worked on cholera, Hafkain on plague, Rogers on Kalazar. So all of these, because consistently understand, the question is asking about original research, original scientific research, and all of these are original scientific research. The famous medical scientist Robert Koch visited Calcutta to work on cholera. Biological laboratories were set up in Bombay, Madras, Kannur, Kasoli, and Mukteshwar. Eventually, research was also supported by Indian scientists. A lot of Indian scientists also did a lot of jobs. Like for example, geography and astronomy was one area where Indian scientists chose most active effort. Indians participated in the officially patronized scientific associations or institutions from the very beginning. Indians did this. You can give a couple of examples like Syed Ahmad Khan in 1864 even founded the Aligarh Scientific Society and called for introduction of technology in industrial and agricultural production. 4 years later, Syed Imdad Ali founded the Bihar Scientific Society. Gradually, that became defunct, but still some of its institutional ideas remained active. 1876, M.L. Sarkar established the Indian Association for Cultivation of Science. In Bombay, Jamshedji Tata drew up the similar scheme of higher scientific research. This eventually led to establishment of IISc, Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, 1909. So thus, there was great and consistent effort by Indians, in spite of complete or to a large extent lack of support by government in promoting scientific research in India. Okay, so this is a quick answer that I can give you for this particular question, and you can continue this answer if you want. In pre-British India, scientific base was actually weak, but we did have some institutions which were there. An extension of this question, if ever comes, you can also answer on a scientific part. Explain how permanent settlement initiated a rule of property in Bengal and what were its consequences. Now, until the coming of permanent settlement, the central idea of your answer must be this. Until the coming of permanent settlement in Bengal, land was not really a property. In fact, land was owned by farmer. But with the coming of permanent settlement, land ownership was now given to zamindar. So two things were happening. Number one, majority people became landless. Then also second part is, zamindars who could extract higher amount of revenues consistently and continuously would always get the benefit. So there were existence of this rule of property. Big zamindars, more power. More taxes they collect, higher zamindari they get. More areas they control. So that's why this question of rule of property in Bengal. The rule of property, that is, everything in Bengal from 1793 was entirely based on the zamindari authority. In fact, zamindars became institutions of British government. Zamindar himself became an institution of British government. He was the pillar on which the British Bengal government was actually established. They also created large scale zamindars. Hence, bigger zamindar, more authority. Now, what was its major consequences? Absentee landlordism also major consequence. Now, what is absentee landlordism? Is if a zamindar is not able to collect the amount of taxes he is supposed to, then eventually he will become an absentee landlord. He will start having greater role to play in losing the land, and new zamindars will come. This led to sort of, you can say, non-local zamindars whose only connect to the area was the ownership of the property, because again zamindar was the sole owner of property. What is the final consequence? General social discontent. Now, what was the general social discontent is, all those zamindars who lost land became discontent with the British and eventually participated in 1857 revolt. And all those zamindars who benefited from this absentee landlordism became the supporters of the British in 1857 revolt. So there were one group which supported, one group which broke. So zamindars as a class itself got collapsed by the time of 1857 revolt. Now this was actually a straight question, nothing much for you to get confused in this particular question. Okay. Let us continue. The next question. Okay. Was the Western education a harbinger of cultural awakening or an instrument of colonial hegemony? Discuss. Since the question is a discuss question, you need to answer both the questions within this. Western culture, Western education was harbinger of cultural awakening, also instrument of colonial hegemony, both. See, Western education, as you can understand from my colleague minutes, was actually created or institutionally established with a single point agenda of actually colonizing Indians and making Indians completely British in practice. Economic and political control over the colonial country is essential for the survival of colonial rule. So any colony, any colonial country can continue their rule over their colony only and if only they continue their power. And how do they do this? Economic control and political control. Colonial education was no doubt most important tool that brought cultural transformation in a colonial country. In fact, one of the best examples you can give is the educated middle class who eventually became the moderate leaders, were the ones who actually trusted in the benefits of colonial rule rather than questioning the challenges of colonial rule. New ideas and experiments undoubtedly enriched the existing knowledge of the people, but the colonial country had to pay a very heavy price for it. So till here, we are saying harbinger of cultural awakening. See, the benefits, there were benefits of colonial rule. Like, for example, take India. India came out of this ancient heritage model and then tried to understand the society, understand the world from a practicalist perspective, from a rationalist perspective, like the questioning of sati practice, questioning of the promoting of widow remarriage, ending of female infanticide. So a lot of social reforms actually happened because of liberal Western education. That's what is the cultural awakening. The entire renaissance that happened in India is because of cultural awakening. Colonial education mandated for better control of colonial country rather than its development. That was the entire idea. To maintain colonial hegemony. The ultimate outcome of this policy might be different, but desired objective is to control, not to change the society. The entire objective, the main aim of colonial government was to control the people, but not to change the people. Look, there is no doubt that new education broadened the horizons of India, particularly horizons of knowledge, especially establishment of printing press, easy availability of books, removed all those traditional barriers which people had in terms of access to knowledge. Ideas of the Western thinkers influenced the younger generation of indigenous society, and they began to question the existing traditional values. A new script of rationalism developed. This is what eventually you can say is the Renaissance. The Bengal Renaissance, Rajaram, etc. Now, at the same time, there were limitations of education system. The main idea of education system was subordination of education to political power. That is, promoting and accepting the advantage of colonialism rather than questioning it. Whether it was Orientalist or Anglicist, the basic knowledge of their education policy was to strengthen colonial rule. In fact, when you see when writing this answer, if you recollect the Anglicist Orientalist dispute, while both of them, the main aim was always subordination of Indians to the colonial rule. That was always the purpose. They only fought the track. They never fought the idea. The Orientalists wanted to do it through indigenization, and Anglicists wanted to do through westernization. The basic purpose of the education policy of British was inseparable from the political interests of the colonial government. So, colonial government wanted to protect their government. Sorry, example, Macaulay. Lord Macaulay and Macaulay Minute. On the whole, colonial administration was keen to promote an education policy which only served its interests, not all interests. Okay. Now, the next question. Can you explain how, after acquiring Diwani, the government of East India Company functioned like an Indian rule? Now, try to answer this in two parts. In the first part, give the concept of Diwani government. What was the Diwani rights? Which came through the Battle of Buxar, Treaty of Allahabad, double government. Okay. Then you can answer how it behaved like an Indian ruler. Just like an Indian ruler, the emphasis of the colonial government, the East India Company government, was revenue generation, but not on revenue development. What I mean by revenue development? To promote better revenue increase, to promote agricultural income, that was not the purpose. it behaved like an Indian ruler is basically the idea was to extract money, extract as much taxes as possible. That's what in 1769 led to the Great Bengal Famine. The 1769 extraction of maximum taxes from the people. Then write about some of the features of Diwani rights, the Raza issue, eventually why the collectors were brought in. So the government basically started to rule Bengal with for taxes but without any responsibility. Now that's what even Indian rulers were doing. Many Indian rulers had this practice. They were not responsible to anybody. They were not answerable to anybody for their policies. East India Company also, government did exactly the same. For this you can refer to B.L. Grover. Grover, the Bengal chapter. The textbook of modern Indian history, B.L. Grover. For this answer. The next question. Okay. Do you think that Indian national movement was a multi-class movement which represented the anti-imperialist interest of all? Give reasons in support of your answer now. Was Indian national movement multi-class movement? Yes. Initially, it was a monoclass. It all started with the zamindars. But slowly, incrementally, it included the professionals, the educated, the landlords, the kings, the masses, the educated, the uneducated, the women, eventually the depressed classes. So you can use that model. So your answer should start with yes, it did represent multi-class, although all the classes did not become part of the Indian national struggle at the same time. They all began one after the other. By the time of 1930s, it represented all classes. The culmination of representation for all classes to a large extent can be justified as Gandhi. While each class had its own representatives, Gandhi became the eventual representative of all the classes. Anti-imperialist interests of all classes and strata. The business class, the educated class, the farming, peasant class, the political class, the artisans, and lastly, others. It represented the business class and their anti-imperial struggle because most of the businessmen observed the colonial government as being irrational and partial towards British businesses. You can give the example of Jamshedji Nusarwanji Tata and his Tisco, Tata, Ghanshyam Das Birla. You can give those examples. They even ended up forming the Bombay Council, the Bombay group of businessmen who suggested even the Great Bombay Plan to Congress, and they understood the anti-imperialist idea. The educated class, yes, the professionals, you can say Congress, the lawyers, the professionals, the members of Congress, they had a very strong agenda towards the British anti-imperialists. The peasant class, with the coming of Gandhi, once it became a mass movement, the peasants actually participated in this because they were affected mostly due to a very poor famine code, taxes, very poor agricultural investments by the government, and consistent discrimination by the government and its members. And then the political class, like moderates, who actually demanded for only participation of Indians in the British government, were then discouraged. Moderates who were actually pro-imperialist eventually ended up becoming anti-imperialist because of British lack of value towards Indian leaders. Like you can say, you can use the word apathy. British had a sort of apathy to Indian political class. Even artisans and handicraftsmen, traders, artisans and traders, this class actually had a very bad opinion towards the British government because again the same, they also suffered just like the businessmen. Artisans and traders were exploited to the most and they were mistreated by the British. And there were others like women, the internationalists, the non-residents. They were also all impacted by the British government and they all also had different um, anti-imperialist sentiment, like you can say Mera Bikaji Kama, Shamli, Krishna Verma, etc. You can give their details in this. The next question, British rule had a different impact on Indian society. Describe in what ways the Indians responded to the revolts of 1857. See, first question, the British rule had differential impact on Indian society. British rule impacted positively to the middle class. This is the class which eventually became the intelligentsia. Whereas for these guys, it was a positive impact because they got education, they had rationalism, they got judicial support, they had a proper government. There, whereas it impacted the peasant class, peasants, zamindars, the kings, the native kings negatively. Give examples of each of these. Peasants were impacted highly due to permanent settlement, the Raitwari system, the Malwari system, where the entire idea of the British government was only about exploiting them economically, and taxation, continuous and extensive taxation was the only thing which was impacting the peasants. Now, zamindars were particularly impacted due to the absentee landlordism and different features of permanent settlement. Where zamindars initially, though they were supporters of the British government, they got impacted the maximum because many of them lost their traditional zamindari. Native kings, in the initial days, native kings who were highly who existed by even forming the subsidiary alliances with the British government, eventually lost their authority to the British government with policies like doctrine of lapse. Okay, so these people had negative impacts. Give these classes, give examples. Then describe in what ways Indians responded to the revolt of 1857. See, the intelligentsia. This answer is basically, this part of the answer is in the response to 1857 revolt. The intelligentsia, the educated middle class, was not in favor of the revolt. They wanted the British government to continue because they had a positive impact due to British Crown rule. Yes, they agreed there were some challenges in the British East India Company's rule, but they were not compulsorily against the British East India Company. Whereas the peasants, zamindars, and kings responded in the most violent way, taking the armed struggle onto their own hands. Okay, so the response of Indians and then differential impact on Indian society. Take different parts of Indian society. The depressed classes, they remained neutral because nothing much really changed for them. The tribals were impacted due to British economic policies. Here you can, in Indian society, you can also use the tribal story. The tribals were impacted due to British economic policies mainly, they exploited economic policies. So the tribals revolted in the most violent way, like Santal Rebellion. You can use the tribals as one. Then the depressed classes, they remained largely neutral. They had a positive impact actually, so they never really attacked on the British directly. But this part should be enough for you to answer. Okay guys, continuing with the remaining parts of the history optional modern India paper 1 questions. Now in this particular session, let us quickly see the question 3C. Analyze how the revolutionaries taught people self-confidence and widened their social base for the freedom movement. Now, basically, the question is asking about the revolutionaries and how did they develop the self-confidence of the people and how did they improve their social base. In the introduction, give a very quick introduction about the revolutionaries, who they were, what they did, and how did they achieve what they had achieved, and then begin about what tools they used to improve their how they taught people self-confidence, like referring to the ideological literatures of the books of Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, Swami Vivekananda, Aurobindo Ghosh, and also talking a lot about the past, how India was a great nation in the past, appealing to the religious, emotional sentiment of the people, like the Hindu ideology, the Hindu heritage, and Hindu thought process. I mean, revolutionary ideas and vocabularies were basically rooted in the distant past in order to oust the colonial rulers from India by force. The idea that India was a great nation before the colonial people came, and how our culture, our traditions, our religions were really very effective. And they used this tool to promote their ideology and improve the self-confidence of the people. Made people realize that they can actually achieve a lot because they had a great heritage in the past before the Britishers actually came to this country. And participation of the youth was devoted to the cult of Shakti and associated with Dharmaraja Samstapana, just like how Chhatrapati Shivaji, using references to literatures of Chhatrapati Shivaji or references to Ashoka, these sort of things were done. And but they also took youth to kill the demons, that is, occupying rulers, like just like how Britishers were consistently referred to as the demons, and renew the cosmic dream of Hindu civilization based on classical Brahminical purity. So, by appealing to the past, they were able to improve self-confidence, and at the same time, by appealing to these past leaders and also referring to different leaders from Jyotiba Phule to the Swami Vivekananda to Raja Ram Mohan Roy, they were able to widen their social base to include even the depressed classes, even the Muslim lot, even the Hindu lot, even the Christian lot, even the Baptista. Joseph Baptista, the first mayor of Bombay, was also part of the nationalist revolutionary support. Aurobindo Ghosh, Bhupendra Datta, Barindu Kumar Ghosh, these people did this, and they sort of built also a style of self-reliance by establishing many factories, etc., to build an economic sustenance and economic self-reliance among the people. And social base, basically by including leaders of all classes, all religions. Okay, your answer should evolve around this particular discussion and this particular range of answers only. Okay, now continuation with that. The next question, that should be very easy question to answer. The next question that we need to answer for a discuss the policies and programs of early nationalists, which is basically moderate. To what extent they were able to fulfill the aspirations of the people. Now, just in this answer, it's a straightforward answer. Guys, answer about moderates. What are the methods of moderates? Moderate basically use the very important tool of PPP. Prayer, petition, protest. They wanted to remain within the constitutional methods of reform and question the British for different benefits, and their moderate methods were basically constitutional methods only of prayer, petition, and protest. To what extent they were able to fulfill the aspirations of the people? Not to a great extent, obviously, because in this particular answer you will have to sort of justify what are aspirations the people had. People had aspirations about reduction of taxes, people had aspirations about equality, people had aspirations about political existence. All these three moderates were not able to really attain a lot of great success, and moderates failing to, say, reducing taxation. In fact, some moderates even supported the extension of zamindari settlement into the rest of India, which, while zamindari or permanent settlement had actually been not very successful in most parts of the places where it was actually implemented. So that part, yes, you can give us an answer as an example and say, yes, they've attempted some reforms, they tried to answer the aspirations of the people, or did they really attain the aspirations of the people? No. They were not really successful in attaining a great number of aspirations of the people, and that's the reason eventually extremists came into existence. That's where your answer's traction must be. So you answer the main program of the moderates, and then you also try to answer what all things moderates actually could not achieve. That way you will be able to smoothly answer this question. You will not have any challenges or complications in answering this question. And 4B, in the light of contentions of McMahon line, analyze the India-China relations in the 1950s and 1960s. Now, this is a straightforward question. Now, give a quick overview, give a quick information about the 1914 Shimla Agreement between India and Tibet, which actually became the basic, you can say, structure for McMahon line. The McMahon line, which eventually ended up becoming India-China border after China occupied Tibet, has consistently been one of the most important contentions and challenges between India-China relations. And then from 1950 to 1960, so you have to answer this. So McMahon line remained a major point of discussion in 1959 when as soon as India got independence in 1947. You can answer this. Tibet tried to question the existence of McMahon line, and Tibet tried to ask India to give back all the territories which India received from during the Shimla Agreement, and India outright rejected. Also in October 1959, when China tried to come to discussions, India categorically said that we are not ready to discuss about McMahon line. There was a consistent, you can say, opposition from Nehru and obviously his foreign advisor Menon, that we did not want to discuss McMahon line, and India's consistent, you can say, opposition to discuss McMahon line remained a main bone of contention. And along with McMahon line, India supporting Tibet, giving recognition to Tibet or giving asylum to the 14th Dalai Lama in the wake of China occupying Tibet, eventually became another major contention. So McMahon line even today remains a major challenge in India-China relations, where parts of Arunachal Pradesh, which India actually called Nepal in those days, are claimed by China as part of Lower Tibet under McMahon line. The same area which Tibet in 1947 questioned or asked India to give back is actually the area today China claims as part of Tibet. So your answer should roam around this particular part of the answer. 1954 India, this 1954 NEFA, North-East Frontier Agency, is what today also remains a major bone of contention between India-China relations, and parts of this NEFA region we want it to be given back. And then for see the next question, how did the popular movement help us to understand the nature of environmental crisis in post-colonial India? See, colonial India, environment issues were never really a major discussion. The maximum discussion that environmental issues even played in the colonial India was in regards to tribal movements and tribal people having a question, or tribal people having opposition to colonization or colonial access to the forest. But in the post-colonial India, obviously you can take, say, three dimensions. There were few environmental issues which were about the forests. There were few environmental crisis movements which were about construction of dams and modern infrastructure, and there were few which were actually institutional as well as non-institutional, like access to mines, etc. So the way to answer this question will be, take about 2 to 3 movements, use them as a point of reference and answer this. Like for example, Chipko movement, 1973, it was about protecting the forests in Uttarakhand. The main objective was protect the forest from Himalayan slopes from the contractors of forest, mainly the women of Diwani village of Tehri Garhwal region, sacrificing the hugging themselves towards the trunks of the tree, trying to protect the trees from chopping down by the contractors of farmers. Then same Silent Valley movement, 1978, you can give this example in Palakkad region of Kerala, where Kerala State Electricity Board was trying to build a dam in Kuntipua River, which runs through the Silent Valley, and certain individuals, Sugarkumari and Kerala Sastra Sahitya Parishad, KSSP, Kerala Sastra Sahitya Parishad, together raised the movement against the government and tried to establish full-fledged movement. They were quite successful in doing this. So this was about protecting the forest against the government. This was about protecting the forest against contractors. Then the trying to exploit the jungles and extract resources from the jungle, particularly by replacing salt trees with tea plantation. As I said, salt tree with tea, and the people of the tribal people themselves did this. There was no single leader or single association in this. The entire Adivasis together fought. And Apiko movement, Karnataka, Uttar Karnataka, Shimoga district were very similar to how Chipko movement happened. Were hugging up the trees, and this was against government. Apiko movement was locally known as Apiko Chaluvali. Locals embraced the trees which were being cut off by contractors of forest department. So I've used these 4 references. In conclusion, you can say the post-colonial environment movements were both against certain actions of the governments, including state governments and union governments, where forest resources were being exploited for the cause of development, while at the same time against private contractors as well. And while post-colonial India in the early days did not really emphasize on sustainable development, these movement leaders did not want to sacrifice the environment for the cost of development. So you can use something like this and give a conclusion for this question. Now, these were some of the important questions of modern Indian history, optional 2022. The questions, if you see my view of this paper, the paper was quite straightforward. There was no really complicated questions here. These were direct from the textbook. Nearly of the 11 questions, almost 6 to 7 questions were directly from B.L. Grover's Modern India textbook. And in fact, literally, B.L. Grover Modern India, NCERT, B and MA History, the IGNO, B and MA History, and B.L. Grover Modern India would more than suffice in helping you to answer these questions and resolve these questions straightforward, directly. No major designing, no major analysis, no major confusions in this type of questions. Now, as such, this was probably a straightforward, easy paper, and nearly all questions were a repeat. They were all coming from the past. So that's it in this series of modern Indian history questions. Keep watching. I will surely come back with some more questions, and some more new videos on this channel. Thank you. You have a nice day. My name is Ranganathan Kondala. Keep following me on Academy. Thank you. Bye.